I've been wanting to get more into sculpture recently, so I had the idea to take this painting of an ice cream cone frog that I did a while back and turn it into a sculpture, and to do it in a way that I could make multiple copies. I started by rolling out some super sculpey polymer clay into a thin sheet and pressing it into a waffle mold I got off of Kim's Gifts Decor Etsy shop. I cut it into a kind of oblong oval shape and wrapped it around a tinfoil cone so it could hold its shape in the oven while I baked it. I used a stylus tool to add some imperfections to the edge of the cone so it looked a bit more natural. I baked the cone so I wouldn't accidentally mess it up while I sculpted the frog on top. I stuffed the inside with tin foil and added a small clump on top to make the base of the frog. I began to form the clay around it. I marked out guides for where I plan to put important features like the mouth, eyes, and arms. I added some wire to serve as structural supports for the arms. The original painting has the arms sticking out a little bit, but for this sculpture I modified it so the arms are right up against the cone. It's much easier to make a mold and casts if the sculpture is kind of one continuous piece rather than something with a lot of appendages sticking out. I made tiny little frog butt cheeks, carving out a crack and adding bits of clay around it for shape. I added balls of clay to the top of the head to start the eyes and added more clay around it to make the eyelids. Rather than carving out the shape of the mouth, I added 2 chunks of clay to form a crease between them and smoothed out the rest. At this point, it was time to start focusing on details. I added small strips of clay and smoothed them out to add back texture, using a lot of rubbing alcohol for smoothing. I carved out some nostrils using a stylus tool. I added small bits of clay for the fingers. I made teardrop-shaped lumps of clay to add the melting drips down the side of the cone. Once I was happy with the sculpt, it was time to bake the whole thing in preparation for the mold making process. I decided not to add the whipped cream to the sculpt. I figured it would be easiest to add to all of the frogs I made after the fact with some sort of paint or air dry material and a piping bag. To create the structure for the mold, I found that I had this coffin-shaped display box that was just about the right size to go around the frog. So I used that as a guide to cut out some cardboard pieces. I used this guide from Smoothon on how to create a 2-part mold, and I'll link that in the description if you're interested in trying this out for yourself. They have really great products and also a ton of online resources, so I highly recommend checking them out. When making a mold, you want at least ½ inch of space going all the way around your sculpture. My first attempt, I wanted to be safe and have plenty of room, so I made a really big enclosure, but this ended up wasting a lot of silicone, which is not cheap. So you definitely want to have enough room to safely encompass the sculpture, but not so much that there's a bunch of empty space that goes to waste. I covered my cardboard pieces with tinfoil so that the silicone wouldn't stick, and then taped them together, making sure to seal the edges where silicone could leak out. If I were to do this again, I would definitely use something sturdier than cardboard. The next step is filling the bottom of the mold with sulfur-free clay. Again, if you're going to do this yourself, you should watch the tutorials from Smoothon. I'll do my best to explain what I'm doing, but it's not my area of expertise. But basically, you want to surround half the sculpture with clay and fill the rest with silicone to make part 1 of the mold. And then you remove the clay and fill in the rest with silicone so that there's 2 separate pieces of the mold. I made a layer at the bottom, put the frog in, and filled the rest up to the halfway point. I sprayed the entire surface with a mold release spray, which is why it's so shiny now, but then I remembered I forgot to put in keyholes, so I went ahead and did that with a screw. These holes are so that the 2 parts of the mold line up better once it's done. I also added in a strip of clay at the top because the mold will need a tunnel at the top to pour the resin in. I mixed up 2 parts of Smoothon's Mold Star 15 and started pouring. One tip I remember from this is that you're supposed to pour from high up and from the lowest spot, allowing the silicone to self-level as it fills up. After letting it cure, I deconstructed the box and pulled out the mold. I removed the bottom layer of clay and cleaned up any excess silicone bits. And this part is super important. At this step, absolutely do not remove the sculpture from the mold. I did this the first time around and couldn't get it to fit back in perfectly enough for part 2 of the mold. And this was also the attempt where I used the really big box, so it was a very expensive mistake and a huge waste of silicone. I reconstructed the box around the frog again with the silicone on the bottom this time. It's super important to remember the mold release spray beforehand to prevent the new silicone layer from sticking to itself. Once that cured, it took a little bit of effort to pull apart, but I finally had the 2 pieces of my mold. I gave it a thorough wash, and it was time to start using the mold to make more frogs. I made a really janky containment thing to keep the mold together while I poured the silicone. The smart thing to do would have been to keep the original cardboard form I used to make the mold and to modify it to use here, but I didn't consider it at the time, and I had already thrown it out at this point. Another thing I should have considered was to use a funnel to pour the resin into the mold. You can't really see from this angle, but the resin ended up spilling everywhere and was super messy. I popped the mold into my pressure pot to let it cure. I'm not sure this step was super necessary, but I wanted to make sure there were as few air bubbles as possible. I ended up making 5 frogs total. The casts ended up having a couple seams visible, so I sanded those areas down and I gave the rest of the models a light sanding to help the paint stick better. I drilled a small hole through the little nubs left over from pouring the resin. This way I could put string or wire through when needed to hang them up while painting. I primed the casts with Krylon brand spray primer. I painted the waffle cones with a base coat of light brown. I went in with a really watered down layer of a darker reddish brown in some areas, wiping some of it away with a sponge so that it stayed in the crevices. I like doing this just to kind of exaggerate shadows and to add more depth. For the frogs themselves, I mixed up a pale orange-yellow color for the base and did a couple coats of that. I ended up not liking it, so I added a cooler toned yellow on top of that. I used a damp makeup sponge to add layers of green to the top. Using a sponge allows a gradual buildup of color and lets it blend nicer. With a detail brush, I added some darker green to the bumps and ridges on the back. I filled in the eyes with a base coat of yellow. I added some orange to the base of the drips and around the base of the frog. Like I did with the cone earlier, I just wanted to add some depth and exaggerate the shadows. I used orange to darken the eyes and then a darker red to add pupils. I used Liquitex matte varnish on the cone to protect the paint. I switched to Liquitex high gloss varnish for the frog to make it look nice and shiny. For the whipped cream on top, I did a couple of experiments to see what would work best. First, I tried using a lightweight drywall spackle, but I found that it was too light and had difficulty sticking to anything. I also tried this sculptural paint from Gaffrey Art Materials, which worked great, but it ended up being quite shiny and didn't look enough like actual whipped cream. I found the best solution was to do a mixture of the two materials. The final product ended up looking exactly like whipped cream. I bought some polymer clay fake sprinkles from the same Etsy shop I got the waffle cone mold from and added those on top. To display the frogs, I got these metal ice cream cone holders off of Amazon. I was worried about the metal ruining the paint, so I wrapped some canvas cloth tape around it to give the frog a softer surface to sit on. And with that, the frogs were done. I love how they turned out, and I learned so much during this whole process. I'm excited to dive more into sculpture and start trying to make more of my paintings into 3D versions. I'll be debuting these for sale at the Oddities and Curiosities expo in Dallas at the end of the month, and I'm hoping to eventually have them in my Etsy shop, so keep an eye out on that if you are interested in buying one. Thank you so much for watching.